Emma Carter had always been skeptical of the supernatural. A hardened journalist, she prided herself on uncovering the truth behind myths and urban legends. When her editor assigned her to cover a series of strange disturbances in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, she scoffed. Just another ghost story, she thought. But she needed a fresh angle for her next feature, and the house, rumored to be haunted by a relentless poltergeist, offered just the kind of material that could sell. The house had been abandoned for years, its decayed exterior cloaked in ivy. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the inexplicable phenomena reported by the few tenants who had dared to live there, objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Emma dismissed it as local folklore designed to scare off trespassers. Armed with her camera, audio recorder, and notepad, she arrived at the house just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the property in eerie twilight. The air inside was colder than it should have been, and the smell of mildew clung to her nostrils. Dust blanketed every surface, and cobwebs stretched across the corners of the high ceilings. The house was silent, save for the occasional groan of the wooden floors under her feet. Emma set up her equipment in the living room, a once grand space now reduced to decay. Her first night was uneventful. She wandered the house, snapping photos of the faded wallpaper, broken furniture, and an unsettling collection of porcelain dolls left in one of the upstairs bedrooms. The only oddity she noticed was the faint scent of lavender that seemed to waft through the air, growing stronger the closer she got to the basement. On the second night, things began to change. Emma was reviewing her footage when she heard it, a faint tapping sound, like fingernails drumming on a hard surface. She froze, her pen poised over her notepad. The sound grew louder, coming from the direction of the kitchen. Gripping her flashlight, she cautiously approached the doorway. The kitchen was empty, but one of the chairs at the old oak table had moved. She was certain it had been pushed in before. Now it stood several feet away from the table, as if someone had pulled it out to sit down. A chill ran down her spine, but she forced herself to stay calm. She set the chair back in place, telling herself it was probably her imagination. But when she turned to leave, the chair slid out again with a deafening screech. Emma's breath hitched. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound authoritative. There was no response, but the air in the room felt heavy, oppressive. She retreated to the living room, her heart pounding. The activity escalated over the next few hours. Objects moved on their own, a lamp toppled off a side table, books flew off shelves, and the chandelier swayed as if an invisible force were pushing it. Emma documented everything, her fear battling her determination to uncover the truth. By the third night, Emma was exhausted but resolute. She decided to confront whatever was haunting the house. Armed with a digital recorder and a sage stick she'd brought as a precaution, she descended into the basement, the source of the lavender scent that had grown stronger each day. The basement was damp and cold, its stone walls covered in moss. In the center of the room stood an old wooden trunk, its lid slightly ajar. The scent of lavender was overpowering here. Emma approached the trunk, her flashlight illuminating the dust particles swirling in the air. Inside, she found a collection of personal items, a diary, a locket, and a child's toy. The diary belonged to a woman named Eleanor Hastings, who had lived in the house over a century ago. The entries painted a picture of a woman tormented by her husband, who had locked her in the basement for days at a time. Eleanor's final entry spoke of her vow to never be silenced again. As Emma read the last words, the temperature in the room plummeted. The basement door slammed shut above her, and the sound of footsteps echoed on the wooden stairs. She whipped around, her flashlight beam trembling as she pointed it toward the noise. "Eleanor," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. In response, The flashlight was ripped from her hand by an unseen force and smashed against the wall. The room plunged into darkness. Emma fumbled for her phone, but before she could turn on its flashlight, she felt a sharp tug on her arm, as if someone were pulling her. "Get out," a voice hissed, low and guttural. Terrified, Emma bolted up the stairs, her footfalls echoing in the silence that followed. She didn't stop running until she was outside, gasping for air under the cold night sky. The next day, she reviewed the audio recordings. Most of it was static, but there were moments where faint whispers could be heard. The clearest was a single phrase, repeated over and over, "Leave my house." Emma published her story, detailing her harrowing experience in the house. But she didn't return, nor did she recommend anyone else should. The house remained vacant, its reputation as a poltergeist's domain intact.